In this video you will learn how to implement Angular authentication and authorization. And in order to understand it better, I prepared for us a small project. As you can see here, we have a login URL. This is /login with the form, email and password. I can click here sign in and we simply get a console log login. And we have exactly the same for register. And this is a /register route, and here we're getting username, email, password, and we can click sign up, and we're getting console log register. Additionally, we have a button logout. When we're clicking on it, we're getting console log logout. Let's look on the code now. First of all, inside our app component, we have just two links to /login and /register, and here is our span with click logout. As you can see inside our app component, there is almost nothing, we just have a logout function with console log. Additionally, here we have a login page and register page. And inside login page, we have a reactive form for login with email and password. And as you can see here, this is a form where we have two fields, email and password, and on submit we simply console log login. And exactly the same stuff we have inside our register. So here is our register form, which is a reactive form, and inside our component, we're creating a form with username, email and password, and here is our onSubmit for register. What we want to implement in this video is the typical Angular authentication and authorization. And in order to do that, we will use a public API where we can create a user, log in a user, and get user information. And it is called Real World Project. And here inside documentation, we can check specific endpoints. So here in the tab endpoints, we have a request like for example /API/user/login, and this is a post request, and we must provide the data in such format here. Then back we will get the user if this user is found with additional authorization token. And this is a specific token that we must store on the client in order to authenticate our user. As you can see here on the right, the link to registration shows us how to implement registration. This is just a post request to /API/users with this content. And the last thing, which is the most interesting for us, is how to get a user if we already have a token. And this is get current user request. Authentication is required, which means we must pass our token to this request, and it will return for us a user if we are authorized. So let's start implementing that now. First of all, we want to talk about register. This is why I'm here inside register component, and inside onSubmit we want to make a post request. But in order to work with our current user, it would be nice to create an interface for that. This is why I want to jump inside source app and create a new interface, and it is user interface TS. And now inside we want to create our new interface, which is a user interface. And inside we are getting first of all an email, this is a string, then token, it is also a string, and username is a string. The most important part for us is a token, and this is simply a string, which is a unique string from our backend, and this is exactly what we will use to authorize our requests. Now let's go back inside our register component. So what we want to do inside onSubmit, we want to make an HTTP request, which means we must inject here our HTTP by using inject HTTP client. Now here inside onSubmit, we can call this HTTP post, because this is a post request, and we must provide first of all a URL here. And our URL is https:/api.realworld.io/api/users. And this is exactly the request to create new user. And as a second parameter, we must provide an object, but this is not simply our form fields. As you can see here, we must put all these fields inside user property, which actually means here it is an object with field user, and the value here will be the value of our form. It is this form.getRawValue. And as you can see, this getRawValue returns for us a username, email and password as an object with strings inside. And additionally for that, we must specify what we are getting back. This is why here inside post, we want to say that back we are getting an object with field user, and inside we have our user interface that we just created. I'm sorry for interruption, but I just want to let you know that I have lots of advanced courses on different web technologies where we create real applications and prepare for the interviews. You can find the link in the description box below. Now let's jump back into the video. After this, we want to subscribe, because HTTP post is returning for us an observable, and we know that back we are getting a response. So first of all, what I want to do is simply write console log and check what we are getting back. Let's look in browser. As you can see in browser, we don't have any errors. We can click on our sign up, and as you can see, we are getting a console error. And this is totally normal because we didn't provide any fields inside. This is why inside our network we can see photo to request. In our payload, all our fields are empty, and this is why inside preview we are getting an error, email can't be blank, which means it is working correctly. What we need to provide here is some username which does not exist, some email which does not exist, and the password. Now we're hitting sign up, and as you can see, our request was successful. We can click on this request, and this is our payload, which means we're getting here username, email, and password. And inside preview, inside response, we're getting this information. And for us, most importantly, we're getting email, username, and a token. And as you can see, this token is simply a string which we must save later. Let's do this now. I want to keep it super simple. This is why I won't create any additional wrappers. You see low-level code to understand how it is working correctly. This is why what I want to do here, I simply want to use local storage .setItem, and I want to store a property token inside. And here what I want to write inside is response.user, this is our user interface, .token, which actually means after we register the user, we're storing a token inside local storage. But this is not enough. We somehow need to notify all places in our application that we're logged in, because after registration or logging, we want automatically to be authorized. In order to do that, I want to create a service which will share this information. This is why inside source app, I want to create a new service, and this is auth.service.ts. And here we need to create an injectable service, and we want to write provided in root. And here we need to export our class, which will be a null service. Now here we don't need any methods. What I want to create here is a signal. And if we're creating a signal, it allows us in different places of our application to access a value inside this signal or change the value. And then all places will be automatically re-rendered. This is why here I want to create current user signal. And here we're calling a signal keyword, and our initial value will be undefined. And now here I want as a data type provide user interface or undefined or null. And now you might be curious why I wrote here user interface undefined or null. Because the main idea is that if we don't know yet if user is logged in or not, so we didn't make this get API request, then we're setting it to undefined. This is the beginning. Then after we made our get call, which we will implement later, we either know that user is not logged in or logged in. If we are logged in, we are getting back this user interface and we put it inside signal. If we are not logged in, then we are writing here inside null, which actually means we have three different states. It is either we don't know yet, this is undefined, we know we are not logged in, it is null, and we are logged in, this is our user interface. So our auth service is ready. Now we can use it inside our register component. This is why I want to inject it here, and it is auth service, and we're injecting our auth service that we just created. Now after we set our local storage, what we want to do is to call this auth service .current user signal, and we want to completely override it and provide inside the whole user, and this is response.user. And with this single line, we're notifying our whole application any place that we got our new user. And the last thing that we need to do is redirect user from the register page. This is why here we need to inject router. So router is inject of the router, and it allows us after this to call this .router, navigate by URL, and we want simply to navigate user to the home page. This is why we are passing here slash. Let's check if it's working. I'm reloading the page, we don't have any errors, and let's type here a user that for sure does not exist. So I'm passing all fields and I'm hitting sign up. And as you can see, we were successfully redirected to our home page, and here is our request, which was successful. And additionally, inside our application local storage, we're saving our token. This is the most important part, because this token is there even after page reload. And this is exactly what we will use to authorize our user. Now we need to do exactly the same stuff for login, and actually it will be 100% the same. What I want to do on the right, I want to open login page, and as you can see it is super similar. The main difference, we are getting here form with 2 fields and not with 3 fields. Now I want to copy paste fully everything inside on submit because it will be similar. And additionally to that, I want to copy this HTTP, our service and router, and put it here inside our login component. We must inject here our service, HTTP and router, and user interface. And what we are doing on login, we are also making a post request, and we are saying that back we will get an object with field user, which is our username, and here we are providing another URL. Which URL? We must jump to endpoints, and here is authentication. As you can see, the request is /API/user/login, and this is an object with field user and our fields inside, which actually means /API/user/login. And here we are providing a user field, which is get raw value from the form, and this is our email and password. As you can see, we are getting response back as always. We are saving the token after logging in the local storage, and we are updating our value inside Signal in our service, and we are redirecting the user. This is all totally fine, and this is exactly the code that we need. Let's check this out. I will jump inside our browser and click on login. Now here we must pass credentials for the user that we already registered, because in other case you can't log in. Here is my user and the password. I'm hitting here sign in, and as you can see I'm redirected to the home page. Most importantly, inside my application, inside local storage, I can see my token, which actually means everything is working fine. The next thing that we need to do is update our header and use current user information from our service, which actually means we don't need to render login and register if we are logged in, but we need to render, for example, a username, so some information for the logged in user. This is why I want to jump back inside source app component HTML, and what we want to use here is access our signal and render this information. In order to do that inside our component, we must inject a service. So here is our service, and we're injecting here our service. After this, we can use it directly inside HTML. So here we can write ngIf, and we want to render this section only when we are not logged in. So we can write here our service.current user signal, and we're calling it with round brackets to get its value, and we're checking that it is null. If it is null, it means that we are not logged in. And it is important to not write code like this, not our service current user signal, because in this case we will render this information even if we don't know yet if we are logged in or not. We don't want that. We want to wait until we know for sure if the user is logged in or not. This is why the correct code is current user signal equals null. We are unauthorized and we are rendering this information. In other case, we are rendering this information, and this is our service current user signal. So inside we have a logout, and additionally I want to render a username. This is by our service current user signal dot username. So we are rendering username because we are sure that current user signal is there. But in order for this to work, we must put here a question mark, because our current user signal value can be undefined and TypeScript will scream an error. As you can see in browser, nothing is rendered, and this is completely correct because by default we are getting undefined, and with undefined we are not rendering this part and we are not rendering this part on the bottom. What we can do, we can jump to login page and log in our user once again. As you can see, after I clicked submit, now my screen is not empty. Inside our header we are rendering my username and logout span, which actually means this is this part. Because what happens, our signal was filled with the value, and now this specific place was notified that signal was changed, and we are rendering this information. This is exactly why we see this on the screen. But most importantly, when I reload the page, we don't see anything at all because we are not logged in and we don't have this information yet. And this is completely normal because every single time when we reload the page, we must read the token from the local storage and try to authenticate our user, which means we are making an API call. and if it is successful, only then we know that user is logged in and we're authorized. This is exactly what we need to do now. Let's jump inside our app component, and here we have ng on init. And inside ng on init, we want to make an HTTP call. This is why here let's inject HTTP, which is HTTP client, and now inside I want to make a GET request. So this is this HTTP GET, and inside we're providing a URL. It will be https api realworld.io/api/user. And this is a URL to check if we're logged in or not. And we don't need to pass any options. But the main point is that we must say what we're getting back, and back we're getting an object with field user, which is a user interface. Now after this we can subscribe and we're getting some response back. And what I want to do here is simply write console log response so we can check if it's working at all. As you can see here, we're getting a 401 error, which is totally correct because our API call is not logged in, and in this case we will always get 401. Most importantly, we didn't get in success and we don't see this console log. This is also correct because we don't want to do anything here if the request failed. And you might think now, okay, we must somehow provide this token from the application, from local storage, inside our request. You are totally correct, but we must do even more than that. Because if we have this token inside local storage, we want to add it to all our API calls. Why is that? Because we want to implement Angular authorization, which actually means we want server always to know which user we are and if we can access the data that we're trying to get from our backend, which actually means we can't simply add here a header with this token. We must somehow add this token to all our requests. And in order to do that inside Angular, we're using interceptors. This is why here inside source app, I want to create a new file and call it auth.interceptor.ts. And what is interceptor? This is a function which intercepts our request, which means when we're writing this HTTP post or this HTTP GET, this function will be triggered and will do some magic before continuing the request. And our idea is to take the request and add this specific header from local storage. This is why what we want to do here, we want to create a new function, auth interceptor, and it is HTTP interceptor function. And here we're getting two things. We're getting a request and next. And we're calling next when we're finished with updating our request so we can proceed with it. So first of all, what we want to do is read our token from the local storage. So here is local storage get item and we're trying to access our token. If it is not there, then we want to write here an empty string, which means our token will always have a string inside. And after this, we want to clone our request because it is not possible to mutate the request. We simply need to clone it and make some changes inside. This is why here we can override the request with request.clone. And inside clone, we can provide the object with field set headers. And this is exactly what helps us to add a header. And what we want to write here inside is an object with field authorization. And the value here will be, if we have a token, then we want to create a string like this. It will be token with big T, space, and then the token that we prepared. In other case, it will be an empty string. And after this, we need to return our next, where inside we're providing a request that we created. Which actually means we're reading here our token, this is a string, we're cloning our request, and we're setting this authorization header. Most importantly, we have this weird structure with a string where we have a token word, space, and then a token. If we open here the documentation for authentication, you can see here authentication header. And as you can see here, you can read the authentication header from the headers of the request when we're providing it like authorization, colon, and the value is token, space, and the string of our token. This is exactly what we're doing. We're either providing inside an empty string, which means we're not logged in, or we're providing it like token, space, token, and this will authorize our request. The last step that we need to do is register our interceptor. This is why here we must jump inside appconfig.ts, and here we have provided HTTP client. Now inside it we must write with interceptors, and we're providing an array inside. And here we want to use our auth interceptor that we just created, which actually means inside the HTTP client module we're providing an interceptor which will intercept all our requests. Let's check if it's working. I'm jumping inside browser and reload the page. And as you can see, we don't have 401 error anymore. Inside network, you can see that we're getting this API call user and we're getting back our data. And this is exactly the data of my user and most importantly, this token. And as you can see inside headers, what was done, we provided inside authorization header. You can see here this header and the value token, space, and our token string, which actually means after registration or logging, we saved to local storage our token and then we added it to all our requests. And the first request that we did to API after page reload is getting current user, because for sure we want to render this information in our header and in the whole application. This is exactly what we want to do now. We must jump back inside our app component. Now here we are getting our response because we successfully got a user. What we want to do now, we simply need to update our signal. This is why this, our service.currentUserSignal set, and we're setting here response.user. And with this single liner, the whole application will be notified that our current user was set. Let's have a look in browser. As you can see, after page reload, we are making this API call, and inside header, this information is rendered because I am logged in now and I see only logged in state. And the last thing that we need to implement is logout, and it is extremely simple. This is just a single liner. Here is my function logout, and I can simply write here local storage dot set item token, and I want to set it as an empty string. When we eliminate the token, we are not logged in anymore. But it is not like that, because inside signal we still have a value. What we need to do additionally is our service, current user signal set, and we're setting it to null. With this line, we're notifying the whole application that we're not logged in anymore. Let's check this out. I am logged in, you can see my user, I am clicking on logout, and I am not logged in anymore, which means we notified the whole application that our user is unauthorized. But here is one small problem that we are getting. When I reload the page, we don't see anything at all on the screen, we don't see our login and register, but essentially we are not logged in, because we made that API call and we got 401 error. So what we need to do, we need to handle this case. In order to do that, we must change our subscribe. I want to cut everything inside subscribe and provide inside an object. And as you can see here, we have first of all next, and this is exactly where our success is going. So inside next, we're writing the logic which is related to success. But we also have here error, and we don't really care what error happens. What we need to do, we need to set user to unauthorized, which actually means we're writing inside the line our service current user signal set null. And with that, we're notifying the whole application that we're not logged in. Let's check this out. I'm reloading the page and these links are there because we set the user to unauthorized. If I log in, it is still working. We see my username and logout. I'm clicking logout, we see these links, and even after page reload, these links are still there. And actually, if you're interested to know how to write unit tests inside Angular, make sure to check this video also.